Welcome, everybody, to this live stream with Charles Matthews and Rowdy Duncan. Rowdy's coming to us from the wilds of the great metropolis, the great state of Maricopa County. Thank you for joining us. And I met Rowdy through the Phoenix College TEDx program. I got to go down there and speak on his stage. He produced a fantastic event, and we talked about redefining strength and the four bullets, I call them, of the old way of being strong. And this is going to tie into what we're talking about, right? The old way of being strong, of having domination, win-lose contests, power over, exclusion, oppression, and repression, and how all of those things package together. Another way that people talk about them when they show up in masculinity is toxic masculinity or unhealthy masculinity. And talking about the four gifts of the new strength, which isn't really new, but the four gifts of the kind of strength, the healthy kind of strength we want to have, of inclusion, expression, vulnerability, win contests, and power with. But unfortunately for so many of us, we've been caught up in the old way of being. But Rowdy's been talking to some men about getting past that into some other places. But first of all, how are you?
Good. Excited to have an opportunity to sit down and chat. I think every time we got an opportunity to sit down and chat, we always have an interesting, thought-provoking conversation.
Absolutely.
And we had kind of talked about some of this stuff online before about like pick up interactions with like incel folks, or there was another article I shared with you with another moniker, and I'm not remembering that name right now.
The
But I'm excited to have
MRAs,
a
the
conversation.
men's rights activists.
Yes,
Yeah.
men's rights activist.
Yeah.
Yeah, these were men that were like eschewing all non-men people and weren't going to talk to or interact with anybody that
Right.
wasn't
No.
male.
Yeah. Those are the
I was
going
like,
their own way. The
yes,
GTOW something. Yeah.
yes.
And taken as a whole, that looks like a reaction to feminism, and some men say it's even a needed reaction to feminism. I don't agree with that. I would call it a defensiveness.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just a fear, right? Like a doubling down on what's not working. That's what it feels like. Is we know it's not working. So since we can tell it's not working, and we can and especially tell that it's not working with women or anybody that doesn't identify as male, let's just hang out with people who do think it's working only, so we can for sure be right in this space.
So we silo ourselves so that we can be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's
Right.
yeah, absolutely, and that's that exclusion is as opposed to inclusion. If we exclude everybody that disagrees with us, then we get to stay in the hierarchy to a certain extent.
Yes, I'm right with the seven other people that agree with me.
Right, right. But unfortunately, because the way that social media and online culture and the dark web amplify sort of fringe voices, that looks
Yeah.
like the MRAs and the going their own ways and the incels and the pickup artists all look like a larger proportion of masculinity than they really are. And then it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I
If
was
that's what's showing up on YouTube, if that's what's showing up in your feed, that's what masculinity looks like to a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever we talk, we always like stumble into things that I've been thinking about for a while. And this is exactly that, right? If all you do is choose to interact with like the 12 people that you were able to find in a dark corner of the internet, believe the same thing as you, then your whole worldview is validated.
Yeah,
Um, Failing to see that that is 0.00017% of the actual
right,
real world. But because you only seek out which already reinforces what you know, then yeah, it completely looks valid and
right,
completely reinforces your worldview, which is really scary because that's not reality. That's just what you want to see your reality to be.
right. Right. Let's, take a moment of empathy, right? If I'm putting myself
Yeah.
back in the shoes of a 14, 15 or 28-year-old man trying to understand sexual politics, trying to understand how to be connected with women or other people that I'm attracted to, if I don't fully understand myself yet and what my needs are, and if I have been told that I suck by even my best friends, I've been told that I'm a
Yeah.
pussy because of all the put down culture. If I've been put down by my parents, I can understand why looking for ways to cement a place on the hierarchy seems like a really almost crucial, almost existential thing to do. Like the incel culture basically says, I can't compete on this hierarchy anymore, so I'm going to go over here, but I'm still going to kind of compete because I'm going to hate women.
Yeah.
The men going their own way kind of say, I'm this the same thing, but I'm not going to shoot up women maybe quite as much with guns. But
Yeah.
the pickup culture says, the pickup artists say, I'm going to establish and reestablish, and this is what we have to do as men over and over again, right? Like we have to establish and reestablish our dominance in the unhealthy version of masculinity over and over and over again. There's no stopping. It's a greased ramp. It's just like
Yes.
we got to keep stepping on people's hands, shoulders, heads, and it's easiest to do that to women.
Well, yes, but only a very specific type of woman, and only very few, right? Because um, they use like things like patterns that are out there. I don't know if you've heard of NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Yep.
Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Yeah. So they'll use this, and they'll use
I'm
this
using
like,
it on you right now.
yeah, right. Right. The problem is if you work within a worldview that only uses this thing, that only has this thing work, then you are now susceptible to the same thing, right?
Right. Right.
But it's hard because it only really works on like folks that really aren't incredibly healthy to begin with, right?
Mm.
So you're not able to find a partner that potentially could challenge you, that could call you on your shit, that is like really a full formed independent human, right? It only works with someone that is prone to codependency because they're seeking validation with the things that they're doing. And an independent person doesn't need validation from somebody else, right? So you can only find a codependent person in that mindset because it will only work on codependent people.
Yeah.
Because codependent people need that constant form of validation, revalidation. That's why the techniques tend to work on only that type of person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and it's sad because, again, the men that go into this thing, they are subject to this too. And it keeps them in a codependent frame because they can never truly be independent because they're stuck with their friends and they're needing that pattern of reward system over and over again.
Right.
So they never get to be a fully functioning.
And they fall under the sway of these guys who are making tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Teaching them these techniques.
Yeah.
That are required for them to get beautiful women into their bed.
Yep.
And just to put it out there, some of the techniques that get talked about, right? The idea is that you're in a bar, or you're in some place, and you see a woman, and a pickup artist would say, you go over to her very boldly, and you're dressed in a way that attracts a lot of attention, even negative attention. You're flamboyant, and you have a canned line that includes a slight insult. Like, I saw you from across the room and I couldn't look away because of the way your nose wiggles when you laugh. So the idea being to actually put this woman, this target is what they call them,
Yep.
at a disadvantage. So
Yeah.
it starts from the very get-go of power over, not power with, not really trying to get to know this person, but trying to knock her back on her heels a little bit so that she
Hmm.
doesn't know whether she's being complimented, insulted, feels self-conscious. I didn't know that about my nose. I mean, I think it would be great if my nose wiggled when I laughed.
Actually, it sounds adorable
It
to
does,
me. Like
doesn't it?
I was
Yeah.
like, that would be something I would look for. Someone who has their nose wiggle. I would not be a neg for me. That would be
But so, I mean,
adorable.
but we judge women so much that I can imagine that for a woman who hasn't had the opportunity to really build some self-esteem, that kind of any close observation like that is going to be like, like someone could say, you have the whitest teeth. And be like,
Hmm.
whoa, what are you saying?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, the idea is to put them off their game and then be really forceful.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like it's so important that the person sees the target, right? So they want to see and pay attention to all the small things that they're doing to potentially get noticed, but then also find that one thing that's slightly off, so they can again stay in that dominant. Like I don't really
Yeah.
think it's incredibly like dominance has such like the it's I don't like the language because like in nature dominance is a very passive force that
Hmm.
doesn't repress. um if you were to look at what dominance looks like, like in the traditional form that we always consider it, like a wolf pack, right?
Yeah.
It's not wolves constantly shoving other wolves down so they can like maintain pack dominance. It's a very passive force that's like, is everything cool here?
Yeah.
Everybody getting along?
Don't we call
Good.
that leadership?
Right. Well, but that's natural dominance. That's what
Right.
dominance is supposed to look like in nature. It's not an
Right.
active repressive force. It's a passive force that makes sure that everyone is okay and it
Yeah.
takes responsibility for the wellness of all people, not the traditional forms that we're used to seeing when we talk about those things.
Yeah. Ugh.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to hang out with like a calm, dominant person. And you're just like, oh, you feel very comfortable to be here. I mean, I think we've been around healthy men like that before. I'm sure you have,
For sure.
Charles.
For sure.
That you're just like, I feel good here. I feel safe. I don't feel like targeted or belittled in any way. I
Yeah.
just feel comfortable in your presence. And
Yeah.
that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
And that's the opposite of what a pickup artist is hoping to do
Right.
with
So
someone.
you've managed to talk to some of these guys. How have you come across pickup artists in your, were they students? Were they friends? How did that end? Was it online?
It was when I first started working in student life and community college, because student life ends up being kind of a space where people who need community can go to be found. And of course, like person that fits the frame of a pickup artist is going to be someone that needs community, right? Because they're going to feel like a little bit of an outsider. They're going to feel somewhat socially awkward. And so they tend to, they were in, at least in those spaces when I started. And then there was also kind of like a group of kids that hung around the student life office, like not in the office, but outside of it. And they would just be there with each other. But that was kind of the known socialization area.
Hmm.
And so pickup artist men would flock to these spaces because women would be there too. And again, right, it's women looking for seeking belonging. And again, you don't, just because you're seeking belonging doesn't mean you're potentially codependent. But, it is one of the things that can be associated with something like that. And I would just talk to them about, life, like issues, like what's going on. And they would tell me about like, oh, you gotta like, there's this thing called the game, right? And I'm
Ah.
like, the game? Like, what's the game? Like, and they would tell me like, well, it's this way of like picking up women. And I was like, what? Like, it's a way of picking up women? Because it was unfamiliar to me growing up. I was actually very awkward with women until I got in a band. And then when I got in
Yeah.
a band, I learned all you got to do is make the audience feel like they're part of the fun and everybody likes you, right? Because now you're not the star, they're the star, and you're just sharing spotlight. Um, so, but I was always very awkward with women when I was growing up. Didn't know how to talk to women, which is funny because like all you got to go do is to learn how to talk to women is talk to women,
Yeah.
and it becomes fairly obvious. Like like just treat them like human beings, not like a conquest or something to be afraid of.
Well,
And it
in
can
all
go through it.
fairness, 15-year-olds, whether they're men or women, girls or boys, they're really hard to talk to.
Yes.
Like as a 50-year-old man trying to talk to a 14-year-old girl completely innocently, it's just like, are
Yeah.
we connecting at all here? You're my
Right.
niece, and I just
Yeah.
asked you what's for dinner, and
Yeah.
I'm not getting.
I don't know.
I'm.
You're like, it's totally cool. Like, you don't need to know. I just want to say what's up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody's in that space at that time, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're so afraid of doing something wrong. It's impossible to do anything right, because you're so self-aware that you can't do anything relaxed and natural.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes hard. But and getting to know them, they would say, like, they told me about like the negging, like, which is that process of like finding the negative thing to put them down. They tell me about peacocking, which is the dressing up to be seen and be noticed. And I was, they tell me about going to these guys that were experts about this stuff. And I was like, and at this point, like, I'm kind of like, I'm older. I have that calm confidence with me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd be interested to meet these guys, like these these wise men that know stuff, right? And two, like, I have to admit, even at the time when I met them, I still saw through things through a lens of social hierarchy, because I'm aware of social hierarchy. Because I grew up not the coolest guy in the world, kind of a smaller kid, didn't work out and stuff like that, and I kind of figured out like how to navigate those waters, but I believed some of those lies too. And so when I would meet these like guru guys, I'm like, these guys are weird. They're awkward, right? Like, I'm like, you're not like calm and confident.
Yeah.
You're not that feeling that we were discussing earlier. You're not dominant, like the natural calm confidence that looks out for everyone. Like, you're like looking all over the place. You're trying to see if you're being noticed. You're very much self-absorbed, self-concerned, right?
Yeah.
Like, dominance doesn't do that naturally. That's not what dominance looks like. You're like, they were insecure dominant, right?
Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, what? Like, like, these are like super cool friends, like, that like know all this stuff. And like, I wouldn't be outwardly demeaning, but I would just be like, what's going on? Like, something's just like off here.
Yeah.
And then and so I didn't really like spend much more time with the guru guys, just because I was like, I know that's fake. I can see and like sniff my way through that. That's not real. And I know that's not real. So I'd go back to having the conversation with the men, and they would tell me like, okay, this is how it works and this is what you would do. And they would be really excited because, again, with that type of person, with those types of issues, those types of patterns, can be successful in creating a one-night stand interaction. What I would ask them is, well, how do you feel now that you've had this one-night stand interaction? Like, are you feeling realized? Are you feeling calm? Are you confident? And they're like, well, no, I need to go out there and like get the next one and get the next one.
Right. It's when we're going after external validation and the thrill of dopamine, it does not last.
Right.
It's not even like a good tall latte. It's like a shot of espresso, barely. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And it was interesting because I was like, well, like, what are you doing this for? Like, what's the goal? And they're like, well, I want to be more comfortable with women. And I was like, well, how many women do you think you need to sleep with before you're comfortable? And of course, there's no answer to this question.
You asked them that question. You asked them how many.
Well, I needed to create a sense of consideration of like, when are you done?
I love it. It's like a Zen koan, right? Because there's no answer.
No, not at all.
What is the sound of not enough? What is the sound of plenty of sex? Right? It's just like,
right?
Well, and then the sound of enough conquest. Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, like, I was really aware at a certain point, and I'm like, so as I spoke to them, I'm like, so like in your group of people, like, what do you all talk about on a day-to-day basis? And they would talk about their conquest and who they slept with and like all these things back and forth. And I was like, do you get any like gratification from like being with the women, right? And they're gonna be like, they'd say kind of yeah, but then they would also be like I could see that the thing that they were most concerned with doing after another conquest is getting back in front of the men to tell them about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I was like, who are you sleeping with? Like, really? Right. And I'm not saying this in a punitive, like making fun of like homosexual frame, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm like,
Just holding up a mirror. Like, who are you doing this for?
right.
Yeah.
Like, you're sleeping with women so you can get validation from these men. And so are you sleeping with the women
Yeah.
or are you kind of like sleeping with the men? Because like
Because that's where the relationship is.
you're so desperate to prove this thing that like you're not in relationship with women at all whatsoever. They wouldn't even know their names.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then I would ask them again. I'd be like, again, do you feel comfortable with women? And then I'd ask them how it would go when they would talk to the women that were a little bit more healthy in the spaces that we would share. And they'd be like, oh, no, that doesn't work. Like that, she's different. I'm like, she's different. Like what? Like, well, I don't know.
Megan's not falling for that.
Right. And they would like diminish her, but only to make themselves feel better. Right. Because they knew the bullshit doesn't work on Megan because Megan's like a very comfortable with herself person.
She's the captain of the soccer team and active in student leadership and
Yeah, she's
yeah.
she's independent.
Yeah.
She doesn't need
Yeah.
your approval. And the other thing that's kind of funny again, right?
Megan knows that her nose twitches.
Right. And she thinks that's great. She knows she's got some stuff in her teeth. It's not a big deal. Right. Like you can't bring her down with these petty things. And again, it's funny because stepping back and observing again social hierarchies, right? Like these men are not, because they're not calm and confident, because they're never in a space of true comfortability, like they're socially somewhat behind the rest of their more realized peers because they're still trying to prove something. And people that don't have anything to prove, none of that stuff works on. Right. So people would be like, what's wrong? But it keeps them like, the frame keeps them in this subservient space because they can never break through codependent to independent because they're stuck needing to prove something to somebody. And it would actually keep them from functional relationships because, as you know, Charles, like to really be in a partnership, there's surrender.
Yeah.
There's acquiescence. Yeah. There's you can't control everything to really be in love.
Vulnerability, right? Power with. Yep. I mean, it's just a dumb thing, but I'm driving back. Part of my day job these days is I'm working for the U.S. Census. So I'm driving back from a slightly remote community. I know my lovely wife has to take the car tomorrow to go visit her mom. There's a half a tank of gas. It's plenty to get to where she's going tomorrow. But I know I don't want to stop, but my marriage wants me to stop and fill up the tank.
Right.
So it's like, okay. Okay. Does that make me a cuck? I got called a cuck on Twitter the other day. I was very excited. I'm like, here I am, Twitter. I'm finally arrived.
I am actually a cuck. But it's so funny. The dudes that are really cucks are actual, like, for real life cucks.
Yeah.
Like the Jerry Falwell Jr. guy. He's the cuck. Like, it's the people that like are like, you're the cuck, that are doing cuck activity.
It's very strange.
I know, because I'm like, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like at the end of the day, if this is what makes you and your partner happy, truly happy, and you have like happy conversations and your relationship's stable and you have an open relationship, like I'm not going to judge you because, dude, that's hard and complicated through my lens.
Yeah.
And I can admit I am not strong enough to do something. I am not in like self-realized enough to that I could watch someone have sex with my partner. I'm not there, and I can admit that, and I'm like totally comfortable with it. And I can also recognize like I don't want to do it, so it's not like a goal of mine.
Yeah.
But to get to that level, like that's tough. That's not easy work, right?
Yeah.
But I would also say if you were really there, you wouldn't use it as a way of demeaning other men.
You're right.
Because you would be calm and comfortable with that, like, yeah, no, like I am sexually aroused by someone being with my partner and watching this happen. And I get great fulfillment from this.
And I love testing my own boundaries and what I'm able to take in and what you know what feels right. Yeah, totally. But yeah, so was there an end result? Did those young men that you were talking to have some realizations? Did they start exploring different parts of their heart? And I asked this kind of in context. The context that I'm thinking about is Peggy Orenstein's book that came out this year called Boys and Sex, where she interviewed lots of young men. I think maybe a little bit younger than the guys you were talking to.
Yeah,
teenage boys in high school.
Yeah,
talking about most of them that she talked to were uncomfortable with hookup culture.
Yeah,
they felt a hollowness around hookup culture, and they wanted to have close, loving friendships with their male friends as well. Those boys that were straight, and to be able to have that closeness without being called gay, queer, fag, whatever.
Yeah.
And they wanted to figure out how to have real relationships with women and not just. But they felt like there was no way off the treadmill.
Yeah, so
I need to start getting my metaphors, because sometimes I say it's a greased ramp.
No, it's a good
sometimes
one.
It's a treadmill. Sometimes it's yeah.
But both work.
Yeah.
So two things would happen in the experiences that I have. One is they'd be like, "Crap, you're for real, and and you get this, and you see through it. And I don't like you and your reality, and so I'm going to stop hanging out with you," right? Because that's easy, right? Like, rather than be around Rowdy who's going to ask all these questions, I'm just going to not talk to you because you make me feel uncomfortable.
Who are you really sleeping with? I'm out.
Right. Like, I'm so not ready to answer that question that I am out of here, and I'm never, like, when I see you, I'm gonna be like, oh my god, there's that dude that figured this thing out.
Yeah.
And I never did it in a way that was accusatory. It was really from a space of wonder, because I know I can't be that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
But the folks that would see me and then also see that I'm hoping for the best of them, they would keep coming around and keep asking me questions and then keep trying to explore stuff, because inherently they would see that it's empty, right? And I don't know, did we ever talk about hungry ghosts before, Charles?
In the very first podcast episode.
Yeah. Again, this is another hungry ghost thing, right? Where you're going around eating one night stands over and over and over again, but you're never full, because what you truly desire is love. And these guru guys would never be open and vulnerable and out of control enough to be able to fall in love. That's just what love costs, right? And so, and what would help me is I would point out stuff. I'm like, look at this person, look how they interact, look what they do, look at how they interact, look at how they treat people, look at how they interact with their ex, right? Are they kind? Are they still friends with them? Did they still have positive relationships? I'm like, see, that's a healthy person right there, right? And it's been nice because my time with pickup artists have gone on to help me with folks that get stuck in friends with benefits paradigms. And again, I have to be careful, because some people in those relationships are totally okay and they're in very healthy spaces, and I'm not necessarily needing to judge them.
Right.
However, that is the exception, not the rule.
Really?
Yes. Well, because you can't put control on love. Really? Right? If we're only friends with benefits, inherently part of the frame of that relationship through my lens, this is what I see and what I have experienced. Again, not to say that there can't be something bigger or greater there, but I think in effect, because there's a governor on the relationship, like you can't go past 55 in the
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
Like you can't get to love because love doesn't have a speed limit, right? But they're stuck with someone that's like okay, or they're fine, or they're like all right. And I ask people, I'm like, do you want to be with someone that thinks you're all right? Or do you want to describe the person that you sleep with as fine, okay,
Yeah.
good enough for right now?
Yeah.
Like for me, I want to be someone's hell yeah, not okay,
Right.
right?
But passion and love is a risk.
It is. And it's very hard to get to a space where you can put your heart out there enough to really be loved. Because, like, one of the things that, and again, forgive me for my heteronormative frame in the way that I say these words, but I ask them, are you with Mr. or Mrs. Right? Or are you just with Mr. or Mrs. Right now? And because you're with Mr. or Mrs. Right now, this keeps you from real love, real connection,
Yeah.
real wholeness, because you're in this very managed thing that like kind of meets some of your needs,
Yeah.
but it's not like all the way there,
Yeah.
right? And in that, there's been folks, because this will come up in my interpersonal communication class like over and over again, because we talk about friends with benefits at length,
Mm.
and they'll see that they're stuck. And I'm like, maybe what you need to do is just take the governor off your friends with benefit relationship and just let it blossom into what it could be.
Right.
Or perhaps you're in a cycle of like just use where one of you like and both people are kind of stuck in the use cycle, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not allowing something to evolve. But the other thing is if you allow yourself to be used in this way, you won't see yourself in a positive enough light to because you're not really loving yourself if you're only with someone who's with you because you're only right for right now.
I wish I could remember what Olympia Dukakis said in Moonstruck. I know I'm dating myself going way back, but just like, we are not here to live happy lives. We are here to break our hearts and fall down and be healed and get back up and be miserable. And I can't do her accent, but it's just the I understand. I can empathize with young people, especially
Yeah.
trying to do risk management. I'm sure there are people, our age and my age
Yeah.
who are doing this as well, but just doing risk management. I mean, passion for anything is a risk. Putting
Yeah.
oneself out there and saying, I really believe in this, or I really care about this person, or, you know, we're here to break our hearts. Louis C.K. We don't talk about him because he's terrible, but he talks about, look, family, I bought you a puppy that's gonna make us cry and weep in 15 years.
Right.
He's like, that's
Yeah.
what we do. That's what we
Right.
do. So, I think, I in college I dated a number of people, mostly not at the same time. But I let myself fall for each one and made mistakes, and they weren't necessarily the right person for me. They were right enough for me to make my mistakes and understand
Hmm. Yeah.
my own capacity to love, to understand the reality of somebody else. And that's something we haven't really talked about yet, is like pickup artists and incels. Their ability to do that depends on their ability to marginalize and otherize their targets,
Yeah.
and to be fully present for the actual existence of another person. It's challenging.
Well, it's so hard because again, when I can like slow down enough to like have empathy, like I see them as stuck in this dependent frame, right?
Yeah.
Because they're always at or underneath some other man that's keeping them in the cycle of dependency, keeping of a cycle of not enough, keeping them in a cycle of unworthy, where they're attempting to constantly prove who they are.
Right.
And it's so sad because like they're investing like loads and loads and time and effort in coming up with like the most amazing pickup line or like finding the smallest like thing to neg somebody with. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you could be putting all that time and energy and effort into healing yourself,
Or into a wall-sized painting,
yeah,
a
anything
fully
positive.
restored '64 Corvair, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
anything. Yeah,
Well, but it's hard because especially with this, they're investing everything into what's wrong rather than like what could take them to right. And I'm like, incel guy, like you're putting all this time and effort and hate and anger and like into this self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, nobody's going to be with you. Well, yeah, dude, of course nobody's going to be with you because like you keep being so intentionally unlovable so you could be right,
yeah,
like that you don't think about, well, what if you went and invested that time into community service? What if you went and invested that time into like really crappy poetry that would help you figure out your emotional like stuff, right?
yeah,
What if you invested that time in, instead of like trying to be around your friends that make yourself feel better, that you just spent time learning how to feel better, right? Like you could get there so much faster,
yeah.
but you're wasting all this energy like with people that don't like you. And you can tell they don't like the guys that are in pickup culture, they don't like each other. They know that they're all in this cycle of less than and they're jockeying for position and who can be, the head or the leader or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But again, like it's proving who's the emptiest to each other, who's the most exploitive, who's the furthest from potential love, because they're so indoctrinated in these patterns of abuse, patterns of attempting to prove dominance that they're never going to get the love.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part.
I'd love to have, spend a whole another hour with you just talking about, that what incels can tell us. Because I think
Yeah.
there's some truth in there that they're mistaking. I think they're mistaking the literal for the real, but there's some truth about like this system sucks.
Yeah.
But I think they're pointing to the wrong system. Well, they're pointing to the right system, but they're measuring it by sex instead of power and dominance and everything. But anyway, yeah, fascinating. So what can we do as slightly older men that are maybe a little bit more comfortable in our skin, men who aren't necessarily in the wonderful and enviable and terrible position of working in student life, like you have been. What do you think we can do for one another to help our brothers out? Because it's like those guys, just even from a selfish perspective, those guys are holding me back. Right, like
Yeah.
because those guys are holding masculinity back, they're holding
Right.
me back. But from a
Right.
loving perspective, I don't want them to be left behind. Even if I can take off and develop my masculinity and my happiness and my success in life completely independently of them, I'm not okay with them being left behind. And that's part of that leadership, right? That's part of that natural dominance. Those guys are part of my pack, no matter what.
Yeah.
That they're my guys. I can't there's nothing I can do except say, come on. Or
Well,
what can we say?
here's the great wonderful truth is when you heal others, you heal yourself. And it's those two ideas are inseparable, right? Because you and I are still healing ourselves, right? The more we reach out, the more we're there, the less we blame and shame folks. Because again, blame and shame just shoves people back into the scary dark corner that they were stuck in.
Yeah.
It doesn't help anything. So I think the
Puts
first one,
more grease on the ramp, right?
for
To go.
sure, right? Well, and then the other part is like, how willing are you to talk about the times you got it wrong?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so for me in my classes, I talk about how, I was one of those guys that got stuff in the esteem cycle of needing to be with incredibly like hot women because I felt crappy about myself. And I was able to date really like good looking women, but I never looked for powerful women. I never looked for balanced women. I never looked for like whole partners that could hold me up on days that I was not strong.
Yeah.
And I got stuck in cycles of like, dating like really like objectively good women, good looking people on the outside, but in the inside, they weren't very strong. They weren't very healthy. They weren't, like they were always in need of like affirmation because all I was looking for was looks. rather than looking for strength and like true beauty, right? And so me telling stories about how I dated all these great looking people that happened to be emotional, socio-emotional train wrecks as people, and how much that hurt me and how much that put me behind in being able to love folks, like, then it makes it okay to talk about your struggle,
Yeah.
your difficulty, because we all have them,
Yeah.
but we're so scared to show our pain to anybody. But when we start showing our pain to people, people are like, whoa, I got that pain too.
Yeah.
I'm stuck with that too.
Yeah.
Or I could do this differently. Like I could do this before, Professor D, as I'm known in my classes. I could do this at 19 rather than 31,
Right.
like I needed to. Right?
45. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think one speaking to the potential audience for this, the men tell stories like that in two slightly different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can definitely tell relationship stories in a like, oh, dude, that lady was crazy.
Yeah.
That was crazy time.
Yeah.
Or we can say, I don't know who I was.
Yep. That's the key.
I fell for that woman, and I don't know what happened to me, and I lost myself. Or my family didn't like her, and it caused so much pain, and I'm still trying to rebuild my relationship with my family after that. And like to be able to tell, as you said, to really share the pain and discomfort, and that's we don't get a lot of permission to do that as men. That's not supposed to be what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to pretend that we're always winning. So even when we tell stories of loss, we try and put a spin on them, like, got rid of that one. Whew.
Right.
Got out with the wife got the house, but I got my life back, or whatever it is to make it sound like we win.
Well, and really, it's the reflection, right? The person wasn't the person. The person was the reflection of the love that I thought I was worth at the time, right? So who was the train wreck? Me, because I sought out the love that I thought I was worth in the mirror of these people. So it was never a them thing. When I say they were train wrecks, I was the train wreck looking for the train wreck to validate my brokenness. Right. It wasn't till I could, and we talked about this before we start, right?
I got a long story about how I was telling a friend who was about to go off on a road trip with her new boyfriend. I'm like, don't do that. No, that's a terrible idea. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been on like 4 different road trips with partners, and they always go badly. And she's like, was it the same car? Did the car break down? I'm like, no, different car every time. She's like, did you go to the same places? Was it just the wrong route? I'm like, no, different routes, southern, northern, north, south. And finally, she kept asking me questions, and finally I was like, she's like, what's the common element there, Charles? I was like, I gotta go.
One of my favorite all-time quotes that I like to tell in interpersonal communication is and I'm going to use swear words, so is that okay? I'm going to
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
Great. But it's such a wonderful allegory.
Let's see what Zuckerberg has to say about it.
If you are surrounded by assholes, you're the asshole. Right? Because like the one constant is you. Right? So like if you feel like everybody in your life's an asshole, I mean, the truth is they're not the asshole. You're the asshole.
Yeah.
And you don't have anybody that can reflect back your wholeness, your healthiness to you.
Right.
Because you're the one stuck with it. And you're right, it's such a great way of like the analogy of the road trip. Like I'd love to have you and Kelly do a cross-country road trip so you can like break the frame.
Oh yeah, no, we have, and we had a lovely time. We had the Spotify mix was perfect. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. I think maybe I changed a little bit too, but I think sharing us men who have a little bit of wisdom and have done some healing, being able to share our stories with younger men, and to show that we can express pain and feel pain, even past pain in the moment, and survive. Right, mm-hmm. That pain does not fundamentally cripple a man.
Yeah.
And that means that vulnerability becomes then a possibility, right?
Yeah.
If pain is not a death sentence, then vulnerability suddenly becomes an option.
Well, pain is a teacher. Every time pain shows up in your life, it's to teach you something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's there to teach you you're sick. It's there to teach you to get off your ankle because it's broken. It's there to teach you that you've been raised with dysfunctional patterns you need to heal, right? Pain arrives as a teacher. And it's funny because in America, we are so pain adverse. But pain is such a gift. It's there to say something's wrong and what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that I needed to learn, and I came to learn way too late, is I saw beauty in just terrible frames, right? Like, I had dated like, objectively hot women, but like my partner is beautiful in a way that I needed so bad in my life. Because I can see my partner like asleep with her mouth open, and I'm like, God, she's just beautiful,
Yeah.
right? And there she is, like, right, and I'm
Yeah.
like, God, she's sleeping so good, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because my partner's called me out on telling that story, and that it makes me look really good. But I think what I'm coming to understand is my partner is making me understand that I'm beautiful enough that I can sleep with my mouth open too,
Right.
and that I'm worth love, even if I'm like, because I got my own versions of that, right? When I like default into anger or when I get defensive, like I'm still lovable, even though I've got those patterns because I'm working to fix those things.
Yeah.
And, with the relationship thing, I tell my students, I'm like, there's two things that you have relationships for. One is practice, because like you just need to practice, like before you're going to be able to be like, to be able to be with the person that you hope to be with someday.
Yeah.
You need practice to get there.
For sure.
And then the other thing is you're supposed to be having some fun. If you're not practicing or having some fun, then maybe it's time for a new relationship, because either you're learning, because it's not win or lose, it's win or learn.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you can have, and like, again, fun's not just sex. Fun's like going to movies together, or like finding an opportunity to like laugh together till you cry. Like that's the fun, right? It's going to see the world's biggest ball of string on the road trip. That's life,
Yeah.
and if
So
you,
having those kinds of conversations, again, having those kinds of conversations with young men to help, and it won't cure all of them, because it's
no,
part of dominance culture is to ignore elders, to ignore
yeah,
older people.
yeah,
I mean, I think you've got, the fact that you've done as much healing as you have at the relatively young age that you have, you've got 5 more years before they start being like,
before they tune me out. Yeah.
But I wonder too, like, I think,
Wait, what's the tune out age, Charles?
I don't know. It depends. It's
Okay.
the reason that I kept doing backpacking trips
Yeah.
with kids is because they would still listen to me even in my 40s, because I knew how to keep them alive. So
Right.
that was key.
The
But
value.
yeah, but I'm just thinking about Earl Hip's advice. Earl Hip wrote the book Man Making,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about the most fundamental thing that we can do as men to help young men is smile at them.
Yeah.
And I in my talk sometimes I talk about, like, even if he almost hit you with his skateboard,
Yeah.
smile at him.
Yeah.
And I think because the relationships between men are the ones that are going to have to get healthy, so that relationships between men and women, or men and their dating partners, younger men, can get healthy, right? As you said, those pickup artists are essentially sleeping with one another. They are
Yeah.
proving themselves to one another.
Yeah.
And when we can say, man, that's not the game.
Right.
I'm smiling at you because you're right here and you're in my pack.
Yeah.
You're my dude. I don't even know you, and you're my dude.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Well, and
hopefully enough of that will take a little bit of air pressure out of that need, as you said, that codependent need to prove themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that you talk about that I think men don't have a lot of great language to speak of. I have a friend whose name's Mr. Vaughn. He's a taller, older black guy, but he's just the most comfortable presence to be in, and you always feel safe and seen and cared for. And I really think more than anything else that can we exude that feeling for one another? Not like, are you tough enough? Are you scared enough? Am I proving myself to you? If I can have that presence, no matter where I go, like kid on the skateboard, hey, it's cool, guy. Like, yeah, you almost hit me. It's fine. You're good. I see you.
Yeah. Keep working on that
And
trick. It'll get better.
yeah, it's just practice,
Yeah.
right? That's the feeling we need to get across better.
Yeah. Yeah. I would, it'd be lovely if all of us could let go of this idea that we have to compete to be seen and appreciated and valued, and that all of that is where we are in the hierarchy is all depend on that. And it's just like, I'm out of the hierarchy. I'm off the ramp. I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the guy in the background making sure everything's cool.
Yeah, everything's cool.
I hope nobody sees me. But you just feel the cool.
Yeah, there is something about that, and I'd love to spend some time talking with you about that too. Just the other day, it's a whole nother topic, but learning the joy that comes from mentoring rather than being the center of attention.
Yeah.
The joy that comes from the power with the joy that comes from seeing, oh wait, you do this way better than I do. Mm-hmm. You go. Yeah. You go. I got your back.
Yeah.
I get and the joy that comes from like, I am so stuck and lost and scared. I don't know what's happening. And my partner or you or somebody else just showing up like, I got you.
Yeah. I got you. It's okay. Yep. I've been there.
Yep.
We've been there.
Yep.
We make it through.
And that's really foreign to so many people, the idea that there is joy to be had in not being on the hierarchy, not being number one, not winning all the time, being vulnerable, and being able to lift up others without it all feeling stepped on.
Yeah.
Like I love giving people a boost up above my head. Let them go.
Yeah.
Let them go.
Like if your whole thing is you launch people to beyond you, that's the best use of strength I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't diminish you at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I feel badass when I do it, and I don't need anybody saying, "Look how badass Charles is." I'm like, I know, I know, I got it.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, I hope the folks who tune into this get something out of it, and at the very least, smile at a young man, or maybe at the very least, just reflect. This is a good opportunity to think back. For those of us who are a little older, what were our relationships like? Is there anything else we need to kind of go back and fix in our own heads and hearts about what happened in the past? Yeah. Anything that maybe fix isn't the right word, but investigate, ask questions about, that can maybe help us be better partners, better lovers, better members of the wolf pack now. Mm-hmm. And then, we do that work, then more and more young men seeing more and more awesome 30 and 40 and 50 and 60-year-old men who are like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Rowdy, thank you so much for spending this time with me. This has been such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you for having me. And like always, I always enjoy our conversations and the mutual ahas we come up with.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's, I don't know, it's some sort of synergistic knowledge formation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's
a
great way of framing it.
All right, brother. I love you. Keep healing.
I love you too. Take care of yourself, my friend.
I will do.
All right.